This video, I'm going to give you actionable steps about how to trigger the number one pro hormone that you've never heard about before. It's called POMC, Pro-opiomelanocortin. And anyone can trigger this, and it is simple, and you don't need fancy supplements at all. And what does it do? I'll reveal that in about 5 minutes. So that's thing number one. It's powerful for moods, your health, longevity, your hormones, sex hormones, and easy fat loss. Now, the second thing that we're going to talk about here is how to get out the mutated, dysfunctional mitochondria. I'll talk about why that's important shortly. So, for a lot of people, and the scientists say that every decade of life, they mutate by about 10%. Now, we can get rid of this old dysfunctional mitochondria and move away from a disease state, gut issues, brain issues, towards a very healthy body and mind. And I'll also show you where the real sources of nutrient dense food are because we've got to feed the mitochondria in our body, and also how to lower stress and anxiety naturally. This is something that I suffered with for a very long time. Social anxiety, panic attacks, performance anxiety. And the best part about all of this, it's free, no costly damn supplements needed. So, why do we want to rebuild the mitochondria? Well, there's a lot of research out now that shows pretty conclusively that it's the root of all disease. Central nervous system, cardiac, heart disease, endocrine, hormones, diabetes. We've also got kidney issues, peripheral, myopathy, gut issues, hearing, eyesight. And this one was in July 1999. This one here from Nature, 2017. So certainly go out there, do your due diligence and research, but you'll find the same thing. Neurodegeneration, liver disease, muscle weakness, cramps, tired after exercise. Does this sound familiar? Neuropathies. We've got visual and hearing impairment, cardiomyopathy, kidney, diabetes. The list goes on. Gut issues, infertility. It's starting to show up. So what's actually going on? The mitochondria go through this process called fission, hang on a second, small damaged mitochondria, and they become mutated and driving a lot of disease. So really simple to fix. Now, POMC, Pro-opiomelanocortin. So here's just one of the products that it makes, and I'll unpack it a bit more extensively on the next slide there. You see here POMC, alpha MSH, your appetite goes down, your basal metabolic rate goes up, thermogenesis goes up, autophagy goes up, and the master circadian hormone, leptin, gains sensitivity. So it's really an impressive hormone. And that's the holy grail of fat loss right there. Think about it. Your appetite is down and your energy is up. Most people are the opposite of that. And you can trigger it. And I'll show you exactly how to trigger it. Very simple. Anyone can do this. So let's have a look at the full POMC story. So it turns into 10 other hormonal products. Now we've got this one here, gamma MSH, blood pressure through sodium balance, modulating sodium balance. And you've probably heard of functional medicine with all of their fancy supplements, ashwagandha. If cortisol's too high or too low, it's supposed to bring it to optimal. Well, when you trigger POMC, this does it naturally. And just to really drive that home, as the scientific literature now shows, pro-opiomelanocortin, POMC, acute glucocorticoid inhibition. Glucocorticoids, fancy way of saying cortisol, and also long-term inhibition. So too high, too low, optimal. And you can trigger it early in the day. Really simple to do. And we can trigger it multiple times throughout the day. No fancy supplements needed. Now this one here, alpha MSH, it's helping with inflammation and it's modulating both branches of the immune system and also sexual health, reproductive function, sex hormone production. And again, as I mentioned there, appetite goes down, basal metabolic rate goes up, and your body fat is fueling your working muscles. Pretty impressive. It's also triggering this other hormone, CLIP. So this is an insulin secretagogue, keeping insulin at healthy levels. And if you want more accelerated fat loss, apart from the ones that I've just mentioned, you've got the lipoproteins here. Lipolysis, fancy way of saying accelerated fat loss. And then anti-anxiety effects, but very fast, sharp brain. The endorphins. Now, you've probably heard of the opioid crisis in America. Well, our body makes these opioids, and they're 20 times more potent than morphine. This one here, antipsychotic, and it also helps with blood pressure regulation. And this is one that I love because I experience it, feel it myself. It's got an amphetamine-like neurological effect, and it also helps the immune system. And the final product that POMC makes regulates behavior, feeding behavior, and also hypothalamic control of body weight. So your body goes to a naturally lean state. And of course, I'm going to give you all the mitochondrial-based interventions, and they're really simple, and it's free. It doesn't cost you a cent. I've recently learned all this information working with a few mentors and also looking at I'm just so fascinated at how the body works. And as the old Socrates says there, what you don't know, you don't know. So this is quantum biology. We're getting down to electrons and protons to power up physiology. So the mitochondria and POMC is the big focus on this talk today, and I will give you actionable steps that's free. It doesn't cost you a cent. Now, what I want to start to explore through quantum biology, and this is all through the research of quantum physiologists, that food is only 1/3 of the energy that our body can produce. That it absolutely blew my mind. And what I'm going to do now is we'll just talk about how this energy is created. So this is the mitochondria. And when we eat food, hopefully we're not going to waste proteins trying to fuel our day. What we want to do is use fat, body fat, and fat through nutrition, and also carbohydrates. So those two energy sources, they have this precursor molecule called acetyl-CoA and acetyl-CoA. Now, this is the mitochondria, as I mentioned, that blue little blob-looking thing there. And those two precursor molecules, they go into the TCA cycle, or the citric acid cycle. Now, all that's happening, I'll show you on the next slide, fascinating stuff, is that they're extracting from your food electrons and protons. Protons are also called hydrogen ions, and you've got two different forms of these hydrogen ions. You've got hydrogen 1 and hydrogen 2, and we don't want a lot of hydrogen 2. And I'll talk about why that is when we get towards the end of this, when we talk about where the real nutrient-dense foods are. Now, to get to that place, I'm going to play this video from Dr. Alexis Cohen. Now, Dr. Alexis got her PhD from Princeton in one of the top metabolic labs on the planet. This is an excerpt video from this podcast with her and Danny Jones. This, I'm sure, will absolutely blow your mind. Listen carefully.
With lower levels of blood cancers and immune cancers. So that would be something like a non-negotiable. You just got to, kids need to be outside playing barefoot anyways. Mm-hmm. We didn't talk about grounding, but when your bare feet are in contact with the earth and your palms, you get free electrons from the earth. Negative charge. Negative charge is what powers your mitochondria to make energy. So
when your body is touching the earth,
mm-hmm. specifically your hands and your feet.
When your hands and your feet are touching the earth, it's mm-hmm. going to give your mitochondria more energy.
Literally, it's free electrons from the earth. And
electrons.
Yeah, and you can look at the studies, and we talked about electrons earlier. That's what powers energy production in the mitochondria. But if you look at the studies on grounding, you can see even 20 minutes of grounding, they do thermographs, so they can show basically if there's inflammation in an area, they'll do like full body. So they'll show like there was inflammation in their face. And actually, fun fact, after a cell phone for like a few minutes, you can see the thermograph showing this inflammatory impetus within the face. The tissues of the face are hot. Ground for 20 minutes, everything cools down. So it allows you to maintain healthy redox status, redox being that net negative charge. So if you think about our ancestors, we were always grounded because any material that is natural will facilitate that flow of electrons. So if you're wearing leather on your feet, for example, or hides or whatever, cotton even, that all allows that electron to flow. But now with all of our rubber-soled shoes, our synthetic fabrics and everything like that, we're blocking that electrical connection to the earth. And we're cutting off basically 1/3 of the electron supply we're supposed to get. When I think about bioenergetics, most people think about food. Food is only 1/3 of the story. We also have direct exposure and stimulation of melanin in the skin by the sun, like I said earlier, that makes free electrons and free energy. And we also have the third pillar being grounding and direct electron exchange from the earth. We're really only getting one of the three pillars in the modern day from the food, and most of the food is BS anyways. So our bodies are starving to death. And that's actually how I see diabetes. I'm going to go back to your leukemia story in a second, but diabetes I really see as like the body is starving because the tissues, the muscle in general, the tissues can't take up glucose very well because insulin resistant. They also can't burn fat or ketones really well either because the mitochondria are dysfunctional. That's like the root of the issue in insulin resistance and in diabetes. And so if your tissues can't burn anything, they're literally just shrinking away. And that's why we see sarcopenia and like muscle loss and frailty being associated with metabolic dysfunction and insulin resistance. And the tissues just need food. They need support. But food doesn't have to be food that you eat. Food can also be sun on your skin and your bare feet on the earth. People don't realize that.
Right.
And that's also something I want to study in my light lab is that like nobody's looking at these kind of interventions, like just putting people outside in nature under natural light because it's not lucrative, I guess. It's literally free 99. You don't have to have anybody else's prescription to go do it either.
Yeah, it's interesting, that connection with the electrons and like the grounding and the food. Like his food is just electrons essentially at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, when you're eating food, you're eating for protons and electrons.
Right.
Of course, you're also eating for
micronutrients. And I'll show you where the true nutrient-dense foods are towards the end here. Now, as you can see, like my mind was blown when I learned this information. I knew about grounding, but I didn't know how powerful it truly was. So, like this, the TCA cycle, all it's doing, you eat your food, the precursor molecule, acetyl-CoA, it is just extracting electrons and protons. Now, these protons are also called hydrogen ions, and you got two forms. You got hydrogen 1, hydrogen 2. Hydrogen 2 is the problem. It's called deuterium, and I'll talk about why that's a problem towards the end. And I will give you actionable steps to get this right. So we have to signal this whole cascade to happen. Now you're starting to understand how much power we truly have. So this is the electron transport chain where you make your ATP. What happens is this. The electrons go into the intermitochondrial membrane, and as they go through complex 1 through 4, all they're really doing is sucking up these hydrogen ions, protons, and when there's enough of them up there, you get this pressure gradient. And this complex here is called ATP synthase. So this is a nanomotor. That's what the scientists call it. So when there's enough protons up there, they are forced down through ATP synthase, like in a waterfall. Spins it like a little water turbine, and that creates your ATP, and importantly, molecular water, which is self-hydrating. So really fascinating stuff. Now, as Dr. Alexis mentioned there, the thermographs, and I thought that was a fun fact, exactly what she said there. A 2-minute phone call can cause an inflammatory impetus. And 2 minutes of grounding, 20 minutes of grounding, you go from inflammation and it cools you off, so you're not inflamed anymore. Really incredible stuff. Now, as she said, that you get a net negative charge from the electrons, so they're also increasing your potential to detox and heal the body. But what's also happening here, you see the blood, the red blood cells before, they're kind of stuck and clumped together. Do you think that's going to have good blood flow, good blood pressure? Probably not. 20 minutes after, the electrons go into the red blood cells and they spring them apart. So it's got a net negative charge, better blood flow. Here is a little bit more information on grounding. Now, cast your eyes to that poor lady's foot here. So you can see that it's not really healing at all. And Big Pharma, God love them, they tried for 8 months to fix it. They couldn't. Nothing changed. She was put into a study and they just told her to ground. So she went out in the sun and grounded. Day 7, day 14. Do you see the difference there? So wound healing is increased. And look what else it's doing here. So you can see that it's going to give you a lot of energy there, but the reproductive system, enhanced stress, it's balancing the autonomic nervous system, reducing stress, improving sleep, and the heart, lowering blood pressure, calms arrhythmias. The list goes on and on. And it's also helping with aging, and inflammation is aging. And if you cast your eyes back over here, that inflammation isn't helpful. And the mitochondria, they don't like it at all. Now, because we now know that it's a bit of a light story, what I want to introduce you to now is red light therapy. Now, I found it absolutely fascinating when I was exploring this with my mentor and also doing my own research that basically that's the full solar spectrum. And you've got red and infrared. So you've got infrared A, B, and C. Now, this has been researched, you ready for this? For the last 100+ years. And there's over 50,000 studies on its benefits. Let me just introduce you to a few benefits here. So the red light therapy, and you can get this from the sun too, and I'll give you actionable steps to trigger the same thing if you don't want to buy or purchase a red light therapy. And you can do it. It's pretty affordable too. So we're talking alopecia, early hair loss, autoimmune disease, and the grounding and the red light also helps with healing the body, wound healing, arthritis, Achilles tendinopathy, inflammation and pain, even spinal cord injury. And what about that pesky abdominal fat that's hiding your abs? Well, it helps with that. I've seen a lot of clinical trials now, and it works magnificently. And you've also got muscle recovery after exercise, skin issues like cirrhosis, even traumatic brain injury. So based on over 50,000 studies and over 100 years of research, this is a great book you can pick up. But have a look. Like we've got things like testosterone deficiency can augment that. Wound healing. I've got depression over here, anxiety, Alzheimer's disease, fibromyalgia, glaucoma, all of those things. That's all published research, and it's being kind of hidden. Why is it hidden? Well, let me just posit this question to you. Well, it's really a statement. Follow the money. And what about cognition? Well, with the red light therapy, what it's going to do is increase your ATP, your energy production. Pretty impressive. And the expression of protective genes. And it's also going to restore healthy neurons in the brain cells, and mitochondrial health. And that's the game right there. And based on that study, that's what the conclusions of that study found. Photobiomodulation during wakefulness, what it's going to do is stimulate mitochondrial activity, neuroprotection, cognitive performance. And it's also going to help you with sleep. It's going to enhance the brain's lymphatic system. So that's the brain's garbage cleanse at nighttime. So it's doing a ridiculous amount. And the research is kind of not being talked about in mainstream too much. And again, I guess you could follow the money. Another research paper, difficult cognitive tasks are less hard. So there's a lot of research on this photobiomodulation, 100 years and also 50,000 studies. What about alopecia hair loss? This one here is 6 months before and after. So it's pretty impressive. And you can also do this with the sun. And I'll show you how to do that towards the end. Another thing that the sun will do, the infrared spectrum, and a bit of the red there. Scientists used to believe that the pineal gland created the bulk of the body's melatonin, and we used to be thought of as sleep hormone. Not so much. Scott Zimmerman and colleagues in 2019 found that the mitochondria can produce a lot of melatonin in the mitochondria, but it won't put you to sleep. It is a powerful antioxidant. Let me show you. So when you trigger melatonin release on demand in the mitochondria, now, one thing to understand about the mitochondria, they produce the bulk of your reactive oxygen and nitrogen species, 80 to 90%. So this melatonin that your mitochondria makes on demand when you're exposed to the infrared spectrum, neuroinflammation goes down. So the red light therapy makes perfect sense. Why it improves cognition. Cholesterol, healthy. Your cholinergic system, so that's rest and digest, good gut health. And it also triggers the parasympathetic nervous system, so it's anti-anxiety. Brain health goes up through neurogenesis, and all of your cells in your body slow down aging, melatonin. And it stops mitochondrial dysfunction, homeostatic balance of minerals, insulin regulation, accelerated fat loss, and these tau plaques and beta amyloids from building up in your brain. You've got cognitive decline, memory issues. Now imagine if the farmer could do that. They can't. And I'll show you how. We're going to trigger it towards the end there. The final thing that I wanted to talk about with melatonin is that it's cheating cell death. Now let's just focus on the brain cells. That's what this study is all about. So when you've got a healthy brain cell, but you've got one that's in trouble, the mitochondria is not working too efficiently, they've got what they can do is donate healthy mitochondria and get rid of the damaged mitochondria. So if you've got melatonin present, you restore neuronal health and restore that brain cell. But if you don't have melatonin present, and most people don't, you've got apoptosis, cell death. You can't regrow that brain cell. And this goes with any cell in the body too, for that matter. Your heart cells, your eye cells, all cells need that melatonin, and the mitochondria produce it on demand. Pretty incredible stuff. Now, let me just introduce you to some of the things that can destroy your mitochondria. A great book that you can pick up is what's called The Light Doctor. So this Dr. Martin Moore, he's an MD with a PhD, and he's been researching this for decades. This is enriched blue light. So as you can see here, conventional blue light, LEDs. There's your first clue. And just some of the things that it can trigger: obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and a lot of cancers there. And it makes perfect sense. And I'll come back to this slide. What I also have found really fascinating is that basically, when we're inside our homes, we've got these LED lights on. Now, these LED lights have a boatload of what's called blue light. So they really only generate visible light, as you can see there. And that's only 10% of the solar spectrum. So you're missing out there, and that triggers POMC. And I'll talk about how to do that later. And you're also missing out in red and infrared. So we now know why being indoors all the time, and you don't have to go outside all the time. There's only a few times a day you need to go outside. That you're missing out on all the benefits of POMC, pre-vitamin D, and infrared healing the body. So what they've also now shown with this blue light that we're exposed to indoors, these LEDs, and also fluorescence for that matter, what happens is your eyes fatigue, they strained, blur vision, burning eyes, dry eyes, headache, discomfort, and it can also damage the eye. More research here. This enriched blue light can damage the mitochondria. It can increase cortisol, and when cortisol goes up, the insulin goes up. And another really terrible thing that also happens is that the blue light highly stimulates the release of dopamine, but it goes up really high and it comes crashing back down. The consequences of that, you've got anxiety, you've got mood swings, inability to focus, because dopamine is the focus neurotransmitter, lack of insight or self-awareness, and low libido. So the artificial LEDs and fluorescence, they're not too good at all. Now, it's not like these scientists haven't been speaking about this, but mainstream kind of don't want you to know. This here was worked out in September 1976. And I learned this from Dr. Alexis Cohen. Again, she's got the PhD from Princeton, one of the top metabolic labs on the planet. And I found this absolutely fascinating. Listen to this.
Several hyperactive children may be noted, especially the boy in the immediate foreground. "90 days after the regular cool white fluorescent tubes were replaced with the new type full spectrum fluorescent tubes with radiation shields, there was a marked improvement noted. and the extremely hyperactive boy has voluntarily moved up to the front row. He raises his hand for recognition and is now up at the blackboard taking part in classroom activities. Prior to the time that this new lighting was installed, this particular boy had an extreme learning disability problem, but quickly learned to read within 90 days after the new lights were installed. There was further noted a general average improvement in both the behavior and academic achievement of the entire class. There are, however, other factors that must also be considered. The implications of the biological effects of light and radiation, as observed through time-lapse photography, are obvious.
Pretty impressive there. So Pharma's solution is Ritalin, which isn't really a solution at all. So what I've now learned from these biophysicists is that sunlight is an essential nutrient. That's number one. And number two, it's a signaler of POMC as well. And you've seen all the benefits of POMC. So based on all the scientific literature now, they're showing that when you get a healthy dose of the sun or use red light therapy, and you don't need a lot of time in the sun, you don't need to be directly in the sun also, all-cause mortality goes down, asthma, autoimmune diseases, cancer, cardiovascular disease, cognitive impairment, gut issues like Crohn's, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, stroke, type 1, type 2 diabetes. So pretty impressive. And another thing I'll just show you here that POMC triggers is what's called, again, melanocyte-stimulating hormone, alpha melanocyte-stimulating hormone. And this triggers the biotoxin pathway to chelate heavy metals and other terrible substances in our bodies. So it's getting rid of, it's detoxing us. It also helps with sleep, chronic pain, gut issues, prolonged illnesses, and it can even get rid of resistant staph infections, bacterial infections. And again, it works alongside as an adaptogen if cortisol is too high or too low, back to optimal, sex hormone production, and also anti-diuretic hormone. And when it comes to alpha MSH, this is what it can achieve for gut health. Antibacterial and parasitic action. It also boosts the thickness of your sinuses, your esophagus, your gut, your intestines, and your colon. And it can even reduce biofilm buildup. Now, biofilms, you can have a UTI infection, urinary tract infection, or a sinus infection, or a gut infection, so it's helping with that. And what I think is remarkable is it selectively increases beneficial bacteria to support gut health, and it modulates the immune system in the gut, and 80% of your immune system is in your gut. And it also enhances motility, so constipation, and it protects you from endotoxins, and it also, again, triggers the biotoxin pathway. Now, one thing here, let's get back to the mitochondria for a moment. So the citric acid cycle, the TCA cycle, the only reason I've got this slide up is to show you that we need nutrient-dense foods to keep the mitochondria working 24/7. It needs a lot of B vitamins, as you can see here. Do you see them all? They're just absolutely everywhere. And another remarkable thing is that when you've got a healthy gut, and these particular strains, they produce all the B vitamins you need, along with vitamin K. So pretty impressive stuff. Now, this is what we've been told to eat. Right, all of these foods here. But see the problem with that? Their overall nutrient density is very low. And they're telling us to avoid these foods, which are very high in nutrients. So you can kind of see the problem that we've got. So I'll circle back to this towards the end. Now let's talk about how we're going to get this right. So this is what I call the minimum viable signal. So in a nutshell there, we want to go out and see the sunrise, and I'll explain why on another slide. That is really important. And then what you can do is download this app. This is called My Circadian. So what this app is going to show you that wherever you are in the world, latitude, winter, whatever it is, it's going to tell you when UVA is present by itself, when UVB is present, but when UVB is present, so is UVA. And when UVA is also present in the afternoon. Now, why is that important? Well, the sunrise, one thing that it will do is set your circadian rhythm, and the UVA will lightly trigger POMC release. And then UVA again in the afternoon. A lot of people suffer with cravings at nighttime, so they completely screw up their diet by snacking at nighttime, and that really interferes with digestion and detox at nighttime. So if you go out and you can see the times that will be available in your part of the world there, so it's going to lower cravings and increase basal metabolic rate. And then the fourth time that you'd want to see the sun is at sunset. Now, how long? Well, a minimum of 5 minutes at each time. So there's not a lot of time that you need to really spend out there. So if you have a think about that, you can really see that if we do things right, we're going to trigger POMC. We're also going to set the circadian rhythm in stone. We can increase our basal metabolic rate. We can also lower our appetite. And that's basically the holy grail. So another thing that we really want to make sure that we've got under control is blue light. And I'll talk about that towards the end. And as a minimum, it's recommended that you ground for about 20 minutes. You can certainly do more than that. But again, this pro-opiomelanocortin, POMC, triggers 10 other hormone products. Alpha MSH is one. So your appetite goes down, your basal metabolic rate goes up, cellular cleaning through autophagy goes up, leptin sensitivity, and that is the master circadian hormone, and also thermogenesis. So it's got a lot of benefits when we get out and see natural sunlight, but you can also do red light therapy as well. Now, here's why we want to at least see the sunrise and sunset. So this is all about the skin and healing the body. So when you go out and see the sunrise, the loop is open, and we want to close that loop by seeing the sunset. It's going to trigger collagen synthesis, which will give you wrinkle reduction and improve sagging skin. And then mitochondrial activity enhancement. So we've got increased cellular energy, ATP, efficient repair processes in the body, improves healing outcomes. Then it's got a lot of anti-inflammatory properties too, because it upregulates genes that are involved in taking care of inflammation. It can also protect you from the UVB and reduce swelling throughout the entire body. And when it comes to tissue or skin repair there, it's going to give you new skin cell growth, wound healing, and also restores skin function. Now, one really cool thing about getting the sunrise there, scientists have shown whether you use a sunrise, because it's got a lot of red and near infrared, but they also did this with LEDs, not the blue LEDs, but the red light therapy, and it gives you a significant protection from the harsh UVB. Here is another reason why you want to see the sunrise, because it's what sets your circadian rhythm. So as you can see right here, emotions. So fluctuations in mood, that's if you don't set your circadian rhythm in stone. Irritability, anxiety, loss of empathy, frustration, negative salience, that's more negative thoughts than you want. Then you rely on things like caffeine to get you out the door. And then cognition tanks, cognitive performance, memory consolidation, memory recall consolidation, attention, concentration, communication, decision-making is impact, creativity and productivity, motor performance in the gym, and social connectivity. It's just like, I just want to be left alone. And that goes back to here, loss of empathy and also compassion for that matter. And then you've got the long-term health consequences, daytime sleepiness, micro sleeps, cardiovascular disease, altered stress response, infection, lowered immunity, cancer, metabolic abnormalities, that's the mitochondria, diabetes, depression, and even psychosis. So let's just talk about lux for a moment and show the difference about being indoors and that enriched blue light and being outdoors. So on the My Circadian app, you see this light here. I was about 4 foot away, and it had a very weak lux of about 113. So this is solar energy, okay? Giving you your ATP and your mitochondria energy. Now the sunrise, so this is in the summer here in Australia. You've got 25,000 lux. So it's just coming over the horizon there. And 1 hour later, when UVA is present, 117,000 lux. That's a lot of solar energy. Now, again, just to really drive this home, we've been exposed to LEDs and fluorescents. They're artificial. They only provide about 10% of the solar spectrum. So it's kind of like we're living on Mars, and our physiology, our mitochondria, our healing processes, our cognition, our dopamine are just crushed. So the enriched blue light can damage mitochondria, increase cortisol, and also insulin. Now, on the short term, when you're exposed to these LED lights, they do rise dopamine. They've shown that, but it comes crashing back down. And the consequences, as I mentioned, are anxiety, mood swings, inability to focus. Your poor kids at school, they're just in this toxic light all the time. Lack of insight or self-awareness, low sex hormones, and libido. And the mitochondria, as I mentioned at the beginning, are the game, because you don't want brain disease, heart disease, and you certainly don't want endocrine issues and diabetes, kidney issues, myopathy, gut issues, eye issues, and hearing issues. Nature, another research paper. So certainly do your due diligence and do your own research, but this is what they're showing now. A great book to pick up is The Light Doctor, as I mentioned there. Decades of research he's put into this. He's an MD with a PhD. Now, one thing that you really want to be very mindful of to protect yourself from the blue light. So all our devices emit a lot of blue light. That's problem one. Problem two, they've got a very high what's called Kelvin. And the problem with that is the brain, so in the morning or at nighttime, it thinks it's noontime and summer. But it's also got a very weak lux. So you want to turn all your devices onto a low, warm Kelvin. And there's other things you can do too to protect yourself from those screens. And then at nighttime, you've got to stop this toxic blue light, because now we understand what it's actually doing to our long-term health, our performance, our mitochondria, our sex hormone production, also our fat loss and muscle growth. It's got a very high Kelvin and it's enriched in blue light. And what I do recommend is these candle light LEDs, and I'll show you what they are in a moment. I don't recommend the candles because they can pull off a lot of chemicals and toxins. But as you can see here, it suppresses nighttime melatonin for sleep by 80%. So even though you're exhausted, you're tossing and turning, you don't have enough melatonin to get into sleep and stay asleep. These LEDs under 2% melatonin suppression. And that's them there. You can grab them on Amazon. Just search on Amazon, like $19, and you get about 24 of them. And the final thing that I'll mention about getting really good sleep is the science is very clear on this. We need 3 hours before we go to sleep with 10 lux. So that app, My Circadian, will actually show you the lux inside your rooms. And there's other things you can do too. You can also get things like blue blockers. And genetics plays into this as well. This is my gene here. I'm super sensitive to blue light, so I won't sleep very well at all. So if you do have the blue light in your home, you can get these blue light blockers, but just make sure when you purchase them that they've got this graph to show you that it's blocking the blue light, and all that's getting through is the red light there. Now, a caveat. How long is it going to take POMC to work fully? Unfortunately, the pharma industry is basically indoctrinated you to believe there's a magic pill for everything. Now, because you've had super low gene expression of POMC for a very long time, it can take 3 to 6 weeks through epigenetic gene transcription. So POMC will be high optimal and you start to thrive. And you have all the benefits of POMC, so it can take some time for this to happen. And recall the information on POMC. It is quite extensive. Now, if you want to know any more information about this, like how to hack the system with different types of light and whatnot, I've got this group that's open and it's all there ready to go. So we're talking eating for accelerated fat loss, the minimum viable plan, also the optimal viable plan, which I'll show you in a moment, water and hydration. So everything is in there. And this is kind of what the optimal viable signal is. It doesn't mean you got to do it every day. It just means that the more you do it, the quicker you're going to get POMC back in the optimal. Another thing that the UVA is really good for is, as I mentioned, that app, there's a certain time when UVA is present and only UVA, 2 times a day. So it's going to help you with skin health, lungs, It's also really good for the immune system. It also increases glucose uptake in the muscles, mitochondrial activity, muscle performance, yeah, and sexual performance, as you can see there, brain performance and heart performance. So there's a lot that we can do, but we just have to pay attention to this new research. Well, it's not really new, is it? 100 years and over 50,000 studies. And don't forget about red light therapy. Lots of information about that. Now, one thing that I just want to quickly talk about is, a lot of people supplement vitamin D. That's not recommended if you want really good performance. Why? Because when you're exposed to healthy UVB, so you don't want to overdo this, of course, you're making all these pre-vitamin D isoforms, and the scientists really don't even know what it's doing. So it's exerting a profound physiological effect on our physiology apart from POMC. So it's doing a lot of heavy lifting. And just to reiterate here, red light therapy, all of these things. So you might want to pause that screen and just see if you've got any of those issues there. Now, it's not going to happen overnight, but it will happen providing you've got good nutrient status and vitamin status. And again, hair, like if you want to keep your hair, 6 months before and after, just incredible stuff. I wish I had known this when I was a lot younger. Now, let's segue into mitochondrial-based interventions to get the mitochondria healthy. So what we're doing is two things. We're getting rid of the diseased, mutated mitochondria, the small, weak mitochondria, and we're replacing them at the same time with brand new, healthy mitochondria. So cold therapy has been shown to do it, but you don't want to rush into that, especially if you're an older person that's got a lot of health issues. So certainly work with a healthcare professional before you dive into that. And sauna as well, another great intervention. And I'll talk more on this in a moment. Evolutionary based foods. Of course, intermittent fasting is also going to help with brand new mitochondria and cleaning out the old ones. And circadian rhythm. So we've covered that, haven't we? So the red light therapy and natural light, fermented foods if you don't have histamine issues. Now this one here, Tumo breathing. You might also know it as Wim Hof breathing. So super oxygenating breathing, then hold your breath. And that also increases mitochondrial biogenesis and HIIT cardio. So all of those things are absolutely free and available to you. And one thing that you can also do, this is what I've done in my office. So this is actually where I am right now. As you can see here, I've got the window open, providing it's not too cold outside, of course. So natural sunlight is coming in. And I've replaced the LEDs with incandescent. They're still available, but you'll note here, importantly, there's a lot of red light. So I'm just basically dousing my office with natural and also red light. And another really fascinating thing about red light therapy, or going out early in the morning or late in the afternoon, and this was shown by Professor Glenn Jeffrey this year, 20th of February 24, you have a marked reduce in blood glucose by 27%. So getting out to natural light is going to lower blood sugar, and you don't have to be in direct sunlight. You can be in the shade because that red light scatters everywhere and the body absorbs it. They've even shown that this photobiomodulation can help with child autism scores. Incredible stuff. Let's just quickly circle back to the mitochondria. And if you recall at the beginning of this, I spoke about hydrogen 1 and hydrogen 2. So here's the problem with the mitochondria. Quite simply is that this is a proton, and that's what the mitochondria need. That's what they need. And you can do a test for this, but we need to have deuterium levels, which is hydrogen 2, at 130 parts per million. The problem with deuterium is that it's twice as heavy and it's twice as big. So number one here, when you try and use deuterium to come down through what's called ATP synthase, it shutters that nanomotor and it eventually busts. And then you have mitochondrial dysfunction. The process of fission, small damaged mitochondria, they mutate, heteroplasmic. So we've got to be on a low deuterium diet as well. So that's problem one with deuterium. Now, problem two, we'll just look at one thing. Cholesterol. So we know that cholesterol will turn into testosterone, sex hormones, but it does a plethora of critical functions in your body. So all cholesterol is 47 hydrogen ions. Hydrogen 1 is what we want to make it out of. And it's got some carbons in there, and it's got an oxygen molecule as well. So imagine for a moment that you've got too much deuterium, like 150 parts per million, or worst case scenario, 180 parts per million. You're going to be making your cholesterol with this, you're going to be making cholesterol with that deuterium there. So the problem is this. Deuterium creates stronger bonds than protons, and we want the protons, hydrogen 1, so they slow down the reaction to make testosterone, and they can even disrupt reactions. So that's problem 1. Problem 2, this breaking the deuterium bond there requires more energy. So as you can see there, we have to be on a low deuterium diet. Now here's some research on deuterium, and again, this has been out for quite some time. Impacts of deuterium excess, but when you get it down to 130 parts per million, these are the benefits that we can expect. Anti-cancer, brain metastases, lung, breast, pancreatic, colorectal, prostate, neuroprotective for things like anxiety, depression, and it will enhance your memory. It makes perfect sense because the mitochondria got what they need to thrive. And anti-aging and antioxidant. Extends lifespan. It also protects your DNA in the mitochondria. It reduces free radical and oxidative stress, which is the crux of all evil. And it can increase the antioxidant enzymes. The more antioxidant enzymes you've got, the more powerful detox system you've got. And again, knowing what it does for the mitochondria, it's going to manage obesity, prevent diabetes, hypertension. It's going to enhance detoxification. It has anti-inflammatory properties and anti-radiation. So it's doing a boatload of heavy lifting. So if you got any questions, drop a comment below, but let's just scroll back up to the top here. So as you can see now, we have to trigger POMC, and it's a light story. It's a nutrient, and it also enhances all physiological functions in your body. And, you know, a large part of it is getting away from that toxic blue light to have healthy mitochondria. And if we start selecting for the nutrient-dense foods, it's naturally going to lower our anxiety. And the best part is this is free. It doesn't cost a dime. And as you now understand with gut health, your gut bacteria, when it's healthy, it's making all the B vitamins and K2. So if our body can do the work, if we give it the right signal and we do the right things during the day. So I hope you found this as fascinating as I have, because once we start implementing these strategies and we go through 3 to 6 weeks, providing we're not too sick and diseased, we're going to reap the benefits of POMC and healthy brand new mitochondria. So that's all I've got for this one. Any questions? Drop them in the comments below.